Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Law Talk. Today's Law Talk is about what to do if. So we're going to talk about several scenarios and let you know what you should do if you are in one of these scenarios. These aren't meant to be complete instructions for every situation, but it's meant to get you thinking and give you a general guide as to what it is maybe you should do. So we're going to talk about what to do if you are a crime victim. We've talked about what to do if you're arrested before. We did a whole show about that. But today we're going to talk about what to do if you are a victim of a crime. We're going to talk about what to do if someone dies. And we're going to talk about what to do if you have a car accident. So let's get to it. If you're a crime victim, the first thing you want to do is get to safety. So sometimes people realize they're a crime victim. If someone is pulling a gun on you and demanding your money, it's pretty clear you're a crime victim. But in other cases, like rape, especially if it's a rape from someone you know, people don't always realize that they've been a crime victim sometimes until they have a chance to think about the fact that they did not consent. Sometimes someone may come to your home that you know and trust and take something. There can be a bit of time before you realize that you're a crime victim. But once you realize that you're a crime victim, you need to get to safety, call the police, make a report, give the police every detail that you can think of, tell the truth. Sometimes people, they're embarrassed by what has happened, so they don't necessarily want to give the police all of the details. You need to tell the police exactly what happened. So if you were, for example, in a location and you were looking to buy drugs, that's not always something people want to admit. They don't want to say, hey, I was, downtown and I was buying drugs and then someone assaulted me. But that bit of information, as embarrassing as it may be, will give the police an idea of who to look for in that situation, who else might have been there, who's well known to the police, who might have also been looking to buy drugs or sell drugs or something like that. So one of the things that you need to do for sure is to make sure you tell the police the truth. Don't destroy evidence, especially in the case of sexual assault. It's very common for the victim, whether it's a woman or a man, to want to take a shower, just get clean because it makes them feel dirty, and then they wash away all of the evidence that the sexual assault has occurred. So as difficult as it is for you to do, you need to preserve whatever clothing you are wearing. Don't wash it. Don't wash yourself. Go to a hospital, call the police, get the evidence collection. It's called a rape kit. There are people who are specially trained to deal with people who have been sexually traumatized, and they will be sensitive to what has happened to you and will help the police gather the evidence. You'll be dealing with medical professionals. It won't be the police in the room gathering the evidence. The medical professionals will gather the evidence. And then you can go and take a shower or do whatever you want to do as far as that goes. You want to say yes to an order of protection. Generally speaking, when a crime is committed, the police will offer you an order of protection. They'll say, would you like an order of protection? And there are different types of orders of protection. There are complete stayaways, where the person who's committed a crime against you needs to stay completely away from you. Or there are refrain froms, where the person who has committed a crime against you needs to only not harm you. They need to obey the law when they're around you. So an order of protection is always a good thing. When someone's victimized you once, you want to make sure that you have protection from them victimizing you twice. And you may think to yourself, well, it's just a piece of paper. What good does that do? Well, the first time someone violates an order of protection, it's a misdemeanor. The second time someone violates an order of protection, it's a felony. So what it does is it gives them incentive to obey that order of protection and stay away from you, lest they be charged with a more serious crime. So you want to make sure that you say yes to the order of protection. You can always go back later and ask the judge to drop the order of protection once the person has done whatever it is they need to do to make amends, but you want the order of protection in the first instance. Another very important thing that people don't always think about when they're a crime victim is going to counseling. Your world has been rocked if you're a crime victim, and even if you're a very strong person, I mean, lots of strong people have had traumatic incidents, right? We'll talk about soldiers who go over to war, and they're strong people. They wouldn't have enrolled in the military if they weren't strong physically and emotionally, but yet they can come back with PTSD and need help with it. And same with a crime victim. I mean, you can be a strong person in the world, but when you're a crime victim, you're violated somehow. And that's difficult to cope with. And people can wind up getting PTSD from being crime victims. They can wind up being afraid to leave their house. There can be all kinds of symptoms of being the result of being a crime victim. It really does impact you negatively. When you're a victim of a crime, often the day starts out like any other. You're having a perfectly fine day, and then suddenly something terrible happens, or you realize something terrible has happened. You either someone's robbed your home, or you realize something valuable is missing, or you're walking down the street and all of a sudden, boom, you're a crime victim, and you weren't expecting that. No one expects that. So it can really rock your sense of safety in your world, and you need to really talk to someone who is a professional who helps people deal with that. It is not enough to just engage in some alternative if you hope to emerge from being a crime victim in a psychologically healthy way. So don't skip the counseling. Don't skip that, and then wait and continue to go until the counselor says that they think you're ready to go. And this is not something that has to take many years. The event that led you to them was probably brief, only one day or a few minutes or whatever time it happened. So you're not going to have to go forever to a counselor to help you process that and deal with it and reframe your worldview. But it'll probably be more than once for sure. So, make sure that you go and do that, because that is the way that you can emerge successfully from being a crime victim to being, the old you. And so that's an important thing to do when you've been a crime victim. Now, if a loved one is a crime victim, especially in the case of children, when a child reports to the parent that so-and-so touched me in a bad place or so-and-so hit me, the first thing the parent does normally, or the other custodian does, is they call the accused perpetrator and start yelling at them. Don't ever do that. Don't do that. First of all, you're tipping off the perpetrator that they've been found out if they are a perpetrator. Secondly, they almost 100% of the time, if they are a perpetrator, just lie about it and accuse the child of lying. And often it's the accused perpetrator is a loved one, someone you care very much about, whether it's a good friend or a family member, because those are the people who have access to children. So do not call the perpetrator. Do not contact them. Do not text them. If a child states that they have been harmed by an individual, you need to call the police. Even if the individual is another child, say a child says that they have been sexually assaulted by another child, you need to call the police. That is what you have to do. Otherwise, you'll be found with Child Protective Services accusing you of neglecting your child's needs. You need to get your child medical attention, even if they don't look like they are harmed enough to need medical attention. Again, there's the aspect of collecting evidence for the police, making sure the child doesn't need medical attention, and you are not qualified to determine whether or not the child is telling the truth or whether or not the child needs medical attention when they are a crime victim. You need to take them to professionals, because Child Protective Services will get involved and they will want to know, why didn't you get the child medical attention right away? And if the answer is, well, I didn't think they needed medical attention, they will probably hold that against you. When a child reports that they're a victim of a crime, you need to take them to the doctor and see if they need medical attention. And again, if you make the mistake of contacting the alleged perpetrator is likely to deny it. And then you're in a situation where, well, do you believe the child or do you believe the person they're accusing? And that's a very difficult position to be in, and you're not qualified to make that determination as to whether or not the child is telling the truth. There are professionals who are trained for years to try to figure out, and do figure out, whether or not the child is telling the truth. So even if you do have that training, if it's a child that you know, love, and care about, you're not supposed to be using your professional services on that. You are supposed to be only working with people who you are not emotionally involved with. So call the police, call Child Protective, and we're going to come back with What If after the break.
start in a minute. So.
Okay.
All right, weather just started, so we got 30 seconds.
Okay.
All right, your rejoin just started. Okay, go ahead.
Now we're back with Law Talk, and we're talking about what to do, what if something happens. And in the first segment, we talked about what to do if you're a crime victim. This is live streaming on Facebook and will be preserved, so if you missed that part, you can go on Facebook under my real name and just take a look at it. So now we're going to talk about what to do if you have a car accident. So the first thing to do if you have a car accident is make sure that you're safe. So stop your vehicle, turn off your engine, because sometimes when cars have accidents, they can burst into flames. You don't want that fuel pump pumping fuel out to where there might be sparks or fire. Make sure it's safe to get out of your car if you're inclined to get out of your car. Cars, sometimes people aren't thinking. They survive the car accident and they're kind of traumatized, and they get out of the car and then they get hit by another car that's coming down the highway. So make sure if you're going to try to get out of your car that it's safe to do so. If the car that you are in poses a safety threat to other traffic because it's blocking traffic, then if you and the car are able, get the car over to the side of the road so it's not a hazard to other traffics. If you can't do that, and even if you can, turn on your hazard light so that everyone going by is aware that this car can't move and that there's a problem. If you have flares or safety triangles, and again, if you are able, you can put them out. Try to determine if anyone involved in the accident, including yourself, might need medical attention. If you are injured, stay in your car with your seatbelt on. Sometimes people are in shock and they don't realize, because when you're in shock, your body protects you by eliminating the pain because you've been in a dangerous situation. And so if you needed to escape from the dangerous situation, our bodies are designed so that we don't necessarily feel the pain when we're seriously injured, so that we can go ahead and escape that situation. That doesn't serve us very well in a car accident. So if you've been in a car accident, what you want to do, and you're injured, and it's pretty clear because you see blood or part of your body is bending in a way it shouldn't bend, then just stay in the car with your seatbelt fastened and wait for emergency help. So chances are good if you're on a road where other people are going by, someone has already called the police. But if you can reach your cell phone, or if you have OnStar, feel free to summon the police yourself. Notify them of the accident and where it's taken place. Dial 911 in the United States, and then you exchange information. After the police come, you can exchange information with the other driver. I had a cap fall off, and it just keeps falling off. So I'm sorry for the interruption. Exchange information with the other driver, and then you take that information, put it in a safe place. You need the name, address, phone number, employer if they'll give it to you, their work phone number, the insurance company policy number, the driver's license number, and the license plate number for the owner and driver of each vehicle. That's the information that the police will get, and if you can get that from the other person, that's great. You need to document the accident, take notes about the accident, and if possible, take pictures with your cell phone and camera of the accident scene and sort of make sure that you've completely documented what happened. Because what happens sometimes is it's very clear what happened at the accident scene, but 2 years later when you're in court, the other party is misremembering or lying their pants off about whatever happened. So you want to make sure that you document it. Write down the time and place, the weather, the road conditions. When you get home, print up something from the internet about the road conditions and the weather. so that if someone tries to say it's something different, you have proof as to what it was. Draw a diagram showing the position of the vehicles and what happened, so that you will remember 2 years later or 3 years later or whenever it's in court what happened. This is the kind of record keeping that you need to do for a potential lawsuit. And unfortunately, if you don't do this, by the time you get to court, what your attorney may hear from you is, gee, I don't really remember, it was a long time ago. So write down all of the details and make sure that you keep them. Find witnesses. If there were other people standing around who were there, go over and ask them if they can give you their name and phone number and address, so that they can also testify as to what happened on that day. So it's very important, because if it's just he said, she said, the judge or the jury doesn't always know what to do. But if you have a witness or two that are willing to truthfully tell what happened, that'll be good for you. Don't make any comments if you're in a car accident about whose fault it is. Like, don't say, oh, I'm so sorry, it was all my fault. It may have been all your fault, but it may not have been. You only saw things from your point of view, and you didn't see much because you got into the accident. You weren't able to avoid it. You don't know what else was happening. For example, somebody might have gone through a red light that you didn't notice was there. Somebody may have been texting on their phone and not paying any attention. So it may be that if you hadn't been doing something, that the accident wouldn't have happened, so you think it's all your fault, but you don't know what was going on in the other car and what they were doing to contribute to the accident. So you don't want to admit fault in any way at the accident scene. Again, because you lack information, you want to let the police figure out what happened. And so they can do that with, they can look at people's cell phone records and see if they were texting at the time of the accident, that sort of thing. So don't admit fault. Don't say, oh, I'm so sorry, it was all my fault. If it was all your fault, well, that'll come out soon enough, but you don't need to admit it. And it may be that you think it's all your fault, but it's not all your fault. Again, you don't have full information because you didn't see everything that happened. The next thing you want to do is seek medical help. And too often people at accident scenes will say, no, I'm fine, I don't want medical help. Well, you don't really know if you're fine. Again, you could be in shock, you could have internal organ damage, you could have received a concussion. Things can happen during an accident that don't show effects right away. I know of one case in my family where there was a car accident, and there were two people in the car, and only one of them survived, but the person who died was actually the one who was able at the scene to call the police and report the accident to the police. And then she bled to death before the police got there. She didn't realize she was injured, she didn't realize how badly she was bleeding, and by the time anyone got there and realized it, it was too late. She had bled to death. So you really need to seek medical attention right away, because all bleeding isn't external. Some bleeding is internal. You could be bleeding inside and not realize it until you pass out and possibly die if you're not in a place where there's medical attention. So always, if you're in an accident, seek medical attention. Because if something happens, obviously you want to make sure that you live. But also, if you have, whiplash that might show up later, or anything that, doesn't hurt when you're in shock, but then later shows up, you go to the doctor, you get it documented that it actually happened from the accident. Because if your life is changed and your physical abilities are changed because you're in pain and you can't do things you used to do, you'll want to document that it came from the accident, because the lawyers later on will try to say, oh no, you had this is a pre-existing injury, or this is an injury you got after the accident. So you want to document everything that happened from the accident. Mention everything to the doctor, every little ache and pain you have, even if you just, you smacked your elbow on the door or on the steering wheel during the accident and you figure, oh, it's just bumped, it'll get better. But then you find out later that there's nerve damage where that, you get the elbow and the funny bone, and that there's some kind of nerve damage there. And then you go back and, a month and try to say, oh, this was from the accident, but you never even mentioned your elbow was hurt to the doctor. People may not be buying what you're selling. So even if it's the truth. So you need to make sure that you document everything that might have gone wrong during the accident. Another thing you have to do is file an accident report with your insurance company. And sometimes you have to file an accident report with the Department of Motor Vehicles. The police file a report, but if there's over $1,000 in damages, you too will need to file a report in New York with the DMV. And we'll be back after the break with what to do if someone dies.
you'll have about 8.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, your rejoiner is just about to start. Okay, go ahead.
And welcome back to Law Talk. We've talked about what to do if you're in an accident, what to do if you're a crime victim, and now we're going to talk about what to do if someone dies. Now, let's say you go to visit someone, and they are at home, and then you walk in and you find out that they have died. So maybe it's an elderly loved one, maybe it's any situation that it is, but you walk in and you find the person has died. What do? Well, the first thing you do is see for sure if they are dead, walk over, see if they're cold or whatever, because if they're not, the first thing you want to do is call an ambulance. But if you're quite certain that they have passed away, then what you need to do first is call the police. All unattended deaths in the state of New York need to be investigated by the police. And an unattended death is a death that occurs outside of a medical setting. So, if someone dies in a nursing home or in a hospital, then that's an attended death, and the police don't necessarily need to be called because medical professionals are there to tell the police what happened. Obviously, if there's a suspicious circumstance, and even in an attended death, then you need to know that the police will be called in a nursing home or a hospital if it looks like something suspicious may have happened. But generally speaking, when somebody dies at home and the death is unattended, the police need to be called so that they can make sure that there isn't any foul play. In other words, that a crime wasn't committed that resulted in the person's death. So you call the police, and the police will arrange for the coroner to come, and the coroner will come and pick up the person's body. This can take more than an hour. I mean, the coroner is not on call. They're not going to show up like emergency services personnel because, frankly, it's not an emergency. The person has already passed away. So the coroner will get there. They will examine, pronounce the person dead generally, and then take them to the coroner's office, where usually in the case of an unattended death, an autopsy is performed to see exactly what the cause of death was. So to find out whether the person accidentally took too many of their pills, if they're an elderly person, maybe they didn't remember, or if they had a heart attack or whatever happened, that will be looked at carefully by the coroner. Normally, though, in the case of an unattended death of an elderly person, the person just died of old age. Their heart gave out, or they had a stroke, or they just couldn't breathe anymore. One of those things happened. So the coroner will make that report, and then you can have the body, if you are the person, the loved one who is responsible, you can have the body taken to the funeral home of your choice. And then the funeral director will take care of the body and help you do whatever it is that you would like to do. If you are the person in charge of making those arrangements, whether you want the person to be cremated or buried or whatever it is that you want to do. So if you are not the person who is in charge, though, and so who's in charge? Okay. Well, if you are married to the person, then you are in charge of what happens to the body. If the person who passes away is a minor child of yours, then you are in charge of what happens to the body. If you are not married to the person, or the person is not your child who is underage, then you are not responsible to do anything other than what I've already said, which is to call the police and give the coroner access to the body. You do not have to, just because you're someone's adult child, take care of the funeral arrangements. You don't have to take care of the funeral arrangements of brothers, sisters. You don't have to do that. Only if you are legally responsible to the person when they're alive are you also legally responsible for the person when they pass away, or the person's body. So what happens if the body isn't claimed, if no one wants to take responsibility? And this happens more often than you might think. A lot of people can't afford a funeral, and they're not legally responsible, so the body may go unclaimed, because if you're claiming the body and making funeral arrangements, then you're signing documents with the funeral home usually which say, I'm going to pay for this funeral. So you don't need to take care of the arrangements. What happens is that if you do not claim the body, if no one claims the body, in New York City they will bury the body on an island called Hart Island. And I bring this up because there are over 1 million people who died in New York City whose bodies weren't claimed, who are buried on this Hart Island in New York City. It's a potter's field, they call it. A potter's field is where they bury people who are poor, who no one claims their body, and so in general they're called potter's fields. And the New York City one is on Hart Island, and there are over 1 million people there. In upstate New York, in Steuben County, they will generally cremate the body. So they will cremate the body. They will make the ashes available for family members if they want them, at no cost to the family member. So I know of one case where a family member did not make any arrangements, no one claimed the body, and the county cremated the body, and then the sister was able to go claim the ashes. So you can still get the ashes even if you haven't paid for the cremation, because the sister is not legally obligated to support the brother while he was alive. So she was not obligated to pay for the funeral when he died, or to pay for the cremation when he died, and she didn't. And the man didn't have much, so no one started an estate for him. She just went and claimed the body. The landlord disposed of the property, and that was that. After determining that, and that's another thing, if you're a landlord and one of your tenants die, you need to contact the family members before you dispose of anything, just as an aside. So the first day after someone dies, let's say you are the responsible person, or you have been named in the will as the executor and you're taking responsibility. Now, just because you're named as the executor in the will doesn't mean that you have to perform the duties of an executor, but you may wish to go ahead and do them. So the first day, if you're the responsible person, is you want to look for written instructions from the person who died about funeral arrangements and that sort of thing, and pay particular attention to any religious instructions. If they wanted to donate body parts and tissue, then you need to get in touch with a hospital. You have to notify family and friends, and people at a time like this are always saying, is there anything I can do? So if there's anything they can do, delegate tasks to them. There may be something they can do. For example, you may need help if the person has an apartment. The rent's paid maybe for that month, but it's not going to be paid after that month. You may need help getting things out of the apartment. So feel free to tell family and friends who ask if there's anything they can do. Well, yes, you can help pack up the apartment, something like that. Find out if they belong to a burial or memorial society, or if they have a prepaid funeral, or if they have any benefits from the Veterans Administration. Social Security, if they're of that age, also has a little bit of money that they will contribute towards a funeral. So you want to do that. And then if you are going to arrange for a funeral at a funeral home or cremation, if you're going to make those arrangements, then you need to contact a funeral home to get those arrangements made. The funeral home will help you get death certificates. Death certificates are very important. You will need many copies of them. We advise people usually to get about 10. You'll need these not only to collect benefits, for example, life insurance, cash and CDs at the bank, that sort of thing, but you will also need to send it to the person's creditors who are sending bills. Often, if you send a copy of a death certificate to a creditor, you never hear from them again, especially credit card companies. It's just not worth the trouble for them to go ahead and make a claim against the estate. So often you just send them a copy of the death certificate and you never hear from them again. You need to notify the Social Security Administration and any other government agency from which they get benefits. And we're out of time, so we'll talk more about this next week on Law Talk. Have a great day, everybody.
All right, thank you. Have a nice week.
You too.
All right, bye.
Bye.